Alright guys, Dominic here for KitGuru, and in for review today is the M34-UWQHD-165-C from German brand LC Power. Hitting the market at £369, I've actually seen this monitor drop as low as 290 quid over the last couple of weeks, making this very much a budget ultra-wide monitor. Sporting a 1500R curved VA panel, 165Hz refresh rate, and of course a 3440 by 1440p resolution, today it's time to see exactly what this monitor can offer, and we're also debuting our brand new monitor testing methodology, so it's time to dive in. Starting first then with the design of the M34-UWQHD-165-C, it is a pretty plain monitor, it has to be said. The front does look fine though, with thin bezels and just one LC Power logo on the chin of the display. The back though is entirely plain matte black plastic with no real design elements apart from an ovular ring where the stand locks into place. The stand itself does also use a plastic exterior, but the V-shaped foot is made from metal. It's not offensive at all, but nor does it strike me as a particularly refined design. One interesting inclusion though is a red LED ring that runs around the mounting point for the stand. You can turn this off in the OSD, but it's red only, so no RGB or anything like that. As for the stand itself, it also offers a decent array of ergonomic adjustments, but nothing class leading. So we get height adjust up to 100mm, and then we get 15 degrees of swivel both left and right, and then tilt from 5 degrees downwards to 15 degrees upwards. Of those, I'd say the height adjust is the main sticking point for me, as even at its maximum level, it wasn't quite tall enough for my preference. You can swap in a custom third-party mount if you want, but interestingly, only using the VESA 75x75 standard, so the more typical 100x100 mounts are not supported. The I/O is also pretty straightforward, as we get just two HDMI 2.0, two DisplayPort 1.4, and then an audio jack. If you're anything like me and you thought the 165C part of the name might suggest there's a USB-C, well, you would be incorrect. The only other thing to note then are the 5 physical buttons which are located just on the underside of the chin, and these are used to control the OSD, and unfortunately there is no OSD joystick on the M34. Speaking of the OSD then, taken as a whole it is surprisingly fully featured and it offers a good variety of controls, something we don't always expect from lesser known brands. I do absolutely hate using these fiddly buttons to get around, however, a joystick will absolutely always be my preference, but the OSD menu itself is sensibly laid out and contains pretty much everything that I would expect to see. That really is it for the design. Like I said, there's not a whole lot to talk about, as there's not really a whole lot of different design elements going on. You might like that, you might not like that, but do let me know your thoughts in the comments. It's time to move on to talk about panel performance though, and this is where we are debuting our brand new monitor testing methodology, which we've overhauled thanks to Portrait Display's Kalman Ultimate software. I did write an article about this brand new methodology. If you do want to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description below. But for now, let's dive into it, starting off with the brightness and contrast. First things first then, the M34 does pretty well here. It has a solid maximum brightness of 375 nits and a minimum of 31 nits, which is arguably more impressive. The black levels though are absolutely superb, with contrast hovering around 4500 to 1 across the range tested, and that is very good even by VA panel standards. As for gamut coverage then, the M34 hits basically 100% sRGB as we would expect, and it also delivers 88% DCI-P3, which is not bad at all for a budget ultra-wide screen, so it's definitely in or around that wide gamut screen territory. Default grayscale performance though does leave a bit to be desired. We see an average delta E of 3.14, though the accuracy drops off as the shades get lighter and lighter. This is due to a slightly wonky colour balance as the shades get increasingly blue across the range, leading to a cool average correlated colour temperature, or CCT, of 7150. Gamma does average almost 2.2 exactly, but it is noticeably high among darker shades, which you can see on the left side of the curve, and it's actually a touch low in brighter shades as shown on the right hand side of the curve. Because the screen is too cool out of the box, I did rerun the grayscale test, but this time using a custom color temperature, which I set with the red channel at 50, the green channel at 49, and the blue channel at 47. Thankfully, this did improve things quite significantly, improving the average delta E to 1.74 and the CCT to 6632, though gamma is much the same. As we're about to see though, things can get even better once we calibrate. Before we get to that though, it is time to look at the default colour accuracy relative to sRGB, and the results are pretty decent. We get an average delta E of 2.75. The worst offenders are the brighter shades of grey or the light white shades, which we know are inaccurate due to the cool colour balance. Relative to DCI-P3, the results don't change much either, apart from one red shade which is now less accurate, but we still get a similar average delta E of 2.54. Once we'd calibrated though using Kalman Ultimate, grayscale improved hugely across the board with a new average delta E of just 0.5, while colour balance is near perfect, hitting 6509. Gamma tracking is also greatly improved with an average of 2.19 and no significant areas of deviation. Colour accuracy has also improved tremendously with an average delta E of just 0.5 and a maximum of 1.11, which is a really terrific result once calibrated. Next up then, we have our response time testing, where we're using the open source response time tool as developed by Andy over at Tech Team GB. The M34 has a total of 4 overdrive modes going from off, normal, fast and ultra fast, and we're testing all 4 at 165 Hz. As it turns out, the overall results are all too easy to summarise. We can pretty much skip over the results with overdrive turned off and with it set to normal, as the screen is just far too slow with those settings. Even using the fast mode, we're only looking at an average response time of 9.37 milliseconds, with some particularly slow rise times from those black and grey shades. Clearly then, the best mode is the ultra fast option, which manages an average of 7.49 milliseconds, but with a number of transitions still exhibiting response times well over the 6.06 millisecond 165 Hz refresh rate window, leaving us with just 57% of transitions coming within that window. The dark level smearing is a particular problem here, as it is unfortunately known to be for cheaper VA screens. For a visual representation, we can see even using the ultra fast overdrive mode, there is a significant amount of trailing and smearing of the image, particularly of darker shades, as you can see in the top 2 images. In the bottom images with the lighter cyan background, this is less noticeable. Comparing performance then to the AOC Q24G2A, motion clarity is noticeably worse for the M34 and does leave a fair bit to be desired. This leads us to a situation then where the average response time of 7.49 milliseconds doesn't really tell the whole story, as a number of slower transitions do affect things noticeably. That makes it a bit tricky for me to recommend this monitor if you're solely looking for a new gaming screen. I played a whole heap of different games on it, and slower paced titles actually look pretty great thanks to the very strong contrast and punchy colours, where response times and motion clarity aren't quite so important. For any faster paced games though, you will notice that the overall image quality isn't quite so pristine as you'd get from a faster display, and the dark level smearing really does get a bit distracting and detract from the overall image, something I really noticed in Cyberpunk at night for instance. The good news though is that input latency is very low, with average on-display lag reported at 2.96 milliseconds, which is less than half a single frame at 165 Hz. Adaptive sync is also supported, and although the M34 isn't officially G-Sync certified, it worked fine for me on my RTX 4090 with no flickering or any other shenanigans. As for backlight bleed, this was okay on my sample. There were a couple of small hotspots, but nothing terrible. Viewing angles though are not great, looking noticeably washed out when viewed from the side, but as a curved screen with a 1500R ratio, you're likely to be sat right in the middle. The last thing to mention then is HDR, but in my opinion, I wouldn't even think of this as an HDR screen. Technically, yes, it does accept an HDR signal, but it's not even display HDR 400 certified, so in my opinion, it's just not worth thinking about. Overall then, the LC Power M34-UWQHD-165-C is a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, I quite like what it does with its out-of-the-box calibration. Contrast is particularly strong, and once we calibrated the screen, we saw excellent colour and gamma results. Unfortunately, response times and overall motion clarity do let this screen down. While we did record a best case average response time of 7.49 milliseconds using the ultra-fast overdrive mode, this panel exhibits clear issues with dark level smearing, and that has a noticeable effect on image quality and motion clarity. This is unfortunately a known issue with cheaper VA panels, and it is present here with the M34. That does make it tricky for me to recommend the M34 then to anyone who's just looking for a new gaming monitor, as other screens around this price point will offer better motion clarity with reduced smearing. Admittedly, maybe not ultra-wide monitors, but you could definitely get a standard 1440p screen that will look better while gaming. That being said, if you can find the M34 on sale for under £300 like I've seen it over the last couple of weeks, I do think it is still worth considering. After all, ultra-wides really don't get much cheaper than this. The out-of-the-box image quality is still decent, and of course it offers good improvements for productivity work. I just don't think I could fully recommend it to anyone who's only going to be gaming on this screen. Anyway guys, that really is going to do it for this review. If you liked it, please do toss me a thumbs up, and as always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and ding that notification bell so you won't miss out when we upload a new video. If you'd like to carry on the conversation with us in our Discord server, I'm going to leave a link to that down in the description. And while there, you can also find links to our merch store where you can pick up a cool t-shirt like one of these, and you could even consider backing us on Patreon. That is it for this one though guys. I'm Dominic for KitGuru, and I'll see you in the next video.